it's Mo. It's that time of year where people are picking their 23 books for 2023, and I have a list that's like that. It's a little bit different though. I like to pick the number of books of the previous year that I found out about in that previous year that I want to read in the current year. So today we're talking about the 22 books I found out about in 2022 and I want to read in 2023. Another way that my list differs from a normal booktuber is that I don't really seek these books out. I don't usually have them in advance. I don't usually know if I'm going to find them over the year. I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't usually complete this list, and it's not really a goal to fully complete this list over the year, but it is a goal to keep my eyes out for these 22 books, and hopefully I'll find them in 2023, and hopefully I'll read them in 2023, but that doesn't always happen that way. So you can see the 20 books I found out about in 2020 that I had wanted to read in 2021. Check in for this year. I will leave that listed down below. And you can also see my recap of how my 21 books I found out about in 2021 and I had wanted to read in 2022 went. I made a video about that too. So the 22 books that I found out about in 2022 are not all new release books. They're not all books that came out around 2022. They're just books that I found out about. And the way that I find these books is I go back through my Goodreads, I go to the first day of 2022, and then I scroll through my want to read list until I find 20 whatever it is, books that like really interest me, that still spark my curiosity, that still spark my inspiration, and I want to get to at some point. I should mention that a lot of these books I don't know that much about because they are just on my radar. They're just something that excites me. I read the synopsis so long ago that I can't recall what they're about, or I don't know much about them. This year I tried to go a little easy on myself. I think as we get up into the 20 number, it's getting harder and harder to find that number of books that I really am excited for and really hope that I can find, and that the book gods smile upon me to forage. So this year was a tougher list to make. I did jury-rig this list a little bit to meet more of my expectations. But let's go through my list of 22 books and I'll tell you when that happens. The first book on my list is the one that I think I most catered to this list. I had originally had The City of Saints and Madmen by Jeff Vandermeer as number 1 on the list, but I changed it to Authority by Jeff Vandermeer. And the reason for this is because in 2022 I read Annihilation and I loved it. It's one that I had heard of previously. Obviously there's a movie made about it, but I didn't realize that it was a trilogy and I didn't think I was gonna love it so much. But I loved Annihilation and I was super excited to read Authority, and although possibly I had heard of this one before 2022, I didn't really realize that it was a trilogy, so I'm counting it. Then my dad got me Acceptance, which is the third in the trilogy, for Christmas, so I kind of feel like although I'm just putting Authority on this list, I'm gonna put Authority and Acceptance. The next book on my list was also a lucky find. Number 2 on my list of 22 books that I want to read in 2023 is The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I was super lucky to find this in December after I had already made my list for 2023, and so I have this one ready to go. The Daughter of Dr. Moreau is a retelling, reimagining of the Dr. Moreau sci-fi horror classic retold from his daughter's eyes. Number 3 on the list is Carmilla by J. Sheridan LaFanu. This is a classic vampire tale and it predates Dracula. Oftentimes people credit this as the inspiration for Dracula, and it's one of the very first vampire stories, and it involves a lady vampire who likes ladies. Number 4 on the list is Cold Enough for Snow by Jessica Au. This is a very short book following a mother and her grown daughter as they travel to Japan on a vacation together. It's about how family roles are reversed and parental roles can be reversed, and it just sounds like a short, sharp, compelling read, and I really want to get to it if I can find it. Number 5 on the list is Below by Laurel Hightower. This is a horror novella that I've heard a lot about in 2022, along with other of Laurel Hightower's works. Below was the one that most interested me out of her work, and I was lucky enough to find it after making this list. It's a horror about Mothman, that's about all I know about it. I'm excited to get to it. Number 6 is a super popular new obsession on Booktube, that is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is a cozy fantasy, which means that the stakes are lower, there's not a lot of violence, there's not a ton of plot or political machinations. I've never read a cozy fantasy that I know of. This one revolves around a orc who opens a coffee shop, so it is fantasy, which isn't really my style, but it's about the service industry, and that sounds right up my alley. Number 7 on the list is They by Kay Dick. This is kind of a forgotten queer classic that resurfaced a little bit in 2022. I have no idea what it's about. I've heard extremely mixed reviews about it. I've heard that it's not necessarily good, but I really want to try it for myself. The next book on the list is 19 Claws and a Black Bird by Augustina Bastarrica. I've been really interested to read her novel Tender is the Flesh, which is about a time in the future where meat is unconsumable by humans, and so they start eating human meat instead. Now, that book sounds amazing to me, and this one I really don't know anything about except that it's a collection of short stories by the same author. I'm not a huge short story person, but I'm trying to get more into them in 2023, so I think this would be a great one if I could find it. This is also a 2023 release. I think it's the only 2023 release on the list, so it will be harder to find, but I'm still really intrigued by it. Number 9 is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This was a 2022 release, and people were really buzzing about this slow, quiet horror that has to do with a woman whose wife comes back from a deep sea mission forever changed. The 10th book on the list is Coffee Boy by Austin Chant. This is, again, I think a novella about the service industry, and I think this has queer rep and trans rep, and I'm excited to read it. Number 11 is one that I've only heard about once. I think I first heard of this book on Jen Campbell's channel, and I never heard of it again, but there was something about it that really intrigued me, and I love the name. It is called The Faster I Walk, The Smaller I Am by Kirsty Skovsvoid. This is a Scandinavian book. That's all I know about it. The next on the list is The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. This is a mystery, I believe, written in the 80s, and it has something to do with language and words and how words are used, and it is a mystery and it is a puzzle that you as the reader can solve. It sounds like a fairly classic locked door mystery, but also has other elements. Peter from Pensively Reading mentioned that this one is like The Phantom Tollbooth in a lot of ways, and that really intrigued me. Number 13 on the list is Medicine Walk by Richard Wagamese. This is an indigenous work that was written, I think, in the 80s or 90s. Wagamese has written quite a few books, and I'm interested in almost all of them, but Medicine Walk seems to be the one that comes up most often. Number 14 on the list is Slade House by David Mitchell. My friend Haley likes David Mitchell, and I think she read his most famous work, which I can't remember the name of, but is a super long book, and that one doesn't intrigue me at all, but Slade House does. It's kind of a mystery, and it has a map in the beginning, and it's about a house that might be bigger on the inside, I'm not sure, but it's not as complicated as some other books about those subjects. I did read a Willa Cather book in 2022, and I really, really enjoyed it, but the one that I had wanted to find and wanted to read was Oh Pioneers. I found out about that one early in 2022, and I've been keeping my eye out for it ever since. I actually don't know what O Pioneers is about, except that Willa Cather writes books mostly about the sprawling Midwest of America and the people who live there. Number 16 is another sort of short story collection. It's How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. This is a collection of interconnected short stories that you have to read all together to complete this novel. It's similar to Revenge by Yoko Ogawa in that way, I think. You could read the stories separately, but together they make a complete experience. Number 17 is You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. This is a 2022 release by Akwege Emeze. I read 2 Akwege Emeze books in 2022, and I really enjoyed both of them, and I definitely want to read more of their work. So I would also take in this slot their poetry collection, which comes out in 2023, which is called Content Warning Everything. Whichever one I find and read first, I think will fulfill my prompt. But I'm super interested in Akwege Emeze's first true romance. Now, I've heard mixed things about You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty, because although it's a romance, it has quite heavy topics. It also has some less loved romance tropes, so I'd be interested to see if I like them or if I don't. Number 18 is Sharks in the Time of Saviors by Kawai Strong Washburn. This is a Hawaiian author, and I think this is a cli-fi novel about a young boy who is in peril at some point, and sharks are his savior, but I'm not sure if that's metaphorical or actual. I do think this book has a lot to do with Hawaiian myth and culture. Number 19 is Hellhound by Ken Greenwald. This might be the oldest on the list, with an original publication date of 1977. This is a classic horror, and I first heard Criminale talking about this one. It has a bull terrier on the front. Yes, the Spuds MacKenzie dog is on the front and is the Hellhound. Criminale described this one as silly, funny, horrific, and definitely a classic horror to get your hands on. Number 20 is The World is a Wound by Billy Ray Belcourt. In 2022, I read Billy Ray Belcourt's nonfiction memoir, and The World is a Wound is his poetry collection. Now, had I heard of this book prior to 2022? Maybe, but I didn't really register what it was or become interested. But I'm definitely trying to read more poetry in 2023, and I loved A History of My Brief Body, his memoir, so I definitely want to get my hands on The World is a Wound. Hopefully I'll be able to find this one this year. Number 21 is Even Though I Knew the End, which is a sci-fi time travel novella by C.L. Polk. I've never read any C.L. Polk, and they first came on my radar when Books and Lala mentioned them quite a few years ago now, but I've been kind of interested in their work. This sapphic novella sounds like a great place to start, and I'm crossing my fingers that I can find it. And finally, the last book in my 22 books I found out about in 2022 and I want to read in 2023 list is A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. Alexis Hall has written many romance books, and I think Regency romance is his bread and butter. This is a trans Regency romance, and although I've never read a Regency romance, I definitely want to start with this one. So those were all the books that I found out about in 2022 and I want to read in 2023. Hopefully I'll find them. Let me know what your most anticipated book to read in 2023 is so far. Check out all the links in the description box for all those other videos. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!